877-850-8585. That's 877-850-8585.
Good morning, everyone.
Now here's your host, Attorney Jeff Vastola.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for tuning in to Vastola on the Law. I am Jeff Vastola. I am your host, and I am in a new location this morning. This is actually my back porch. I decided to try a new spot, and according to VJ, it sounds like I've got decent signal. Can you hear me okay, VJ?
Yes, you're perfect.
All right, great. This is 30 minutes of free legal advice, and I am Jeff Vastola, your host. I'm an attorney, and every Saturday morning I'm here from 7:30 to 8 to give you free legal advice. My beautiful wife is watching via Facebook Live, and you can do the same thing. If you are a friend of mine on Facebook, then apparently Facebook will tell you when I go live, and you can just click on the link or whatever the window shows you. If you are not a friend of mine on Facebook and you'd like to be able to watch on Facebook Live, then friend me. And give me a call to let me know that you're doing it too, because obviously Facebook recommends that you have lots of friends to join your group that most people don't know. And so I don't typically accept those people that I don't know. So just give me a call and say, hey, my name is Martha Jones and I want to be your friend on Facebook because I listen to your radio show, and I will be happy to friend you. That would be awesome. Just a little bit of self-promotion here. Okay, I'll tell you what, tell Don to hang on for just a few minutes. I was expecting Don's call. He emailed me earlier in the week and said he had some follow-up questions to those insurance issues that I spoke about a couple weeks ago. We'll take Don's call in just a couple minutes, VJ. But this show is brought to you every week by my law firm. It's Vastola Legal. I'm a personal injury law firm. We have offices in Palm Beach Gardens, Stewart, and now down in Isla Mirada. Specifically Tavernier, but a lot of people haven't heard of where that key is located. But down in the Florida Keys, we actually have a new office. So if you know of anybody that's down that way and needs legal representation, we represent clients throughout the state of Florida, even though we only have those 3 offices. So you can reach us anytime by going to our website at vastolalegal.com. And of course, you can call me anytime, 24/7. That means on the weekends, at night, it doesn't matter. I always want you to be able to reach me. And the toll-free number that goes to my cell phone is 833-VASTOLA. That's 833-827-8652. That forwards to my cell phone constantly, 24/7. And I encourage you to use it, especially if something happens. If you're involved in some kind of an incident and all of a sudden you have questions, confusion sets in immediately. And then once the confusion and the dizziness and everything else begin to go away a little bit, you're going to have questions, and that's the point. I want to be here as a resource to answer your questions, and you can always go to these shows for insight. They're uploaded onto my website. We have a YouTube station, just trying to stay hip. But one more thing I want to talk about before we take Don's phone call. We have our very first free legal seminar coming up on April 27th. I've rented a room at the Embassy Suites Hotel. Not a hotel room, but a conference room. And it's free. It's free to everybody. That's you. Come to the Embassy Suites Hotel in Palm Beach Gardens on April 27th from 1 to 4. I'm going to be putting on a free legal seminar. Myself and several guests that I've invited are going to come, and we're going to be prepared to give brief presentations. And then after the presentations, we will break out into separate areas so that you can meet with whoever it is you want to speak with personally and confidentially and freely. It is a free legal seminar, as far as I know, the first of its kind, at least in this area, and we're really excited about it, and we really want you to attend. So please let us know if you plan to come. All right, VJ, let's talk to Don from Delray Beach. Is he still on the line?
Yes, he's there.
All right.
Yes, morning, Jeff.
Hey, Don, how you doing?
Okay, I have a couple of questions on a personal injury protection. I'd like to know, will PIP pay up to 80% of medical expenses for passengers riding in my car, whether I am at fault or not?
Yes, and I know you have several questions, so let's take them one at a time, and so far so good.
Sure.
The answer is yes if. Passengers in your vehicle are entitled to use your PIP coverage if they do not have a policy of their own, because understandably, sometimes you have a passenger in your car that owns his own car, and so he has his own policy of PIP insurance. If that's the case, then your passenger is not going to use your policy. Your passenger is actually going to use his own policy of PIP. So, and for those of you watching on Facebook Live, I apologize. I'm looking down at my computer screen. I should be looking at this one here. So the answer is yes if there is, and there's also one other qualifier. If that passenger does not live with somebody that has a policy of automobile insurance, because that policy is also primary over yours as the driver of your vehicle. So essentially, if the passenger in your car does not have PIP coverage anywhere else, then the passenger in your vehicle will qualify under your PIP policy, and the deductible that applies to you does not apply to a passenger in your car. So if you have a policy of PIP coverage of $10,000, but you have elected for a $1,000 deductible, you actually only get $9,000 of coverage, but yet your passenger in your car will get $10,000 of coverage because, again, the deductible does not apply to the passenger. Okay?
Okay. Is there a copay with PIP?
Well, PIP only pays 80% of what the insurance company deems reasonable. So essentially, yes, whatever that 20% left over is considered a copay, what you are responsible for. Now, keep in mind that insurance companies have the latitude to decide that the medical provider's bill is not reasonable. And when they do that, it can create much more than just 20%. And let me give you an example. Let's say that you go to the doctor and the doctor submits a bill for $500. Well, the insurance company, when it receives that bill, can say, well, we only think that $100 is reasonable, and so we're going to pay $80, which is 80% of 100. So that leaves you with not just a $20 balance, it leaves you with a $420 balance. So that does happen. It happens with some relative frequency, and frankly, that's one of the reasons that folks need a lawyer when they get into an accident. There's a lot of these things that are happening behind the scenes that if you've never been involved in it, you don't understand. You're just not aware that it happens. But anyway, to answer your question, there is something of a copay. Now, you can avoid that, at least the 20% that the insurance company is not going to pay, by electing to carry MedPay coverage in Florida. That's medical payments coverage. It's an optional coverage, much like everything else on a policy here in Florida. But it will work to cover that 20% that the PIP doesn't pay. What's your next question, Doc?
Okay, someone has Medicare, Medicaid. Will that pick up the hospital expenses?
Well, Medicare, Medicaid, private health insurance, whatever you may have, is used as a secondary payor. So the answer to your question is it should, but it's not limited to just hospital. Now, I realize when people elect different forms of Medicare than, Medicare A, Medicare B, Medicare C, and D, those are all for specific reasons. And so I'm not going to talk about the Medicare issues. I'm going to talk about health insurance in general. The way it works in Florida, because I see my Uncle Jeff is watching and he's up in Buffalo, New York, so this probably doesn't apply to you, Uncle Jeff, but if you're involved in an accident, the law in Florida says the medical providers are supposed to bill the PIP first. Now, the only exception to that is if you're working, because if you're working, they're supposed to bill work comp first if it's a work comp claim. But I'm going to eliminate any issues of work comp for purposes of our discussion. So the medical providers are supposed to bill the PIP first, and then any supplemental insurance that you have, they can bill secondarily. So Medicare, Medicaid, private health insurance, they can all be billed to pick up the difference that the PIP doesn't pay. And if you have medical payments, whatever the MedPay doesn't pay. Keep in mind that medical payments coverage and any health insurer will have what's called a right of subrogation, which means they have a right to be reimbursed if you ever collect money from a third party because of the accident. So, don't think that it's free money. Don't think that if you settle your case, but medical payments and or Medicare, Blue Cross Blue Shield, or whatever the case may be, has paid your bills, that you don't have to pay them back, because you do. They will have a lien. Now, you don't pay them back at 100%, but you do have an obligation to reimburse them. The typical rate of reimbursement, depending on who the payor is usually around 50 or 60% of the lien. So if there's a $10,000 lien, you can expect to probably pay at least $5,000 to $6,000 of that. So what's your next question, Doc?
Is it worth it to have the subrogation rights on the MedPay?
Well, you don't have a choice. The insurance companies themselves, because those are monies that the insurance companies are paying, they say in their contract that they have a right of subrogation, and it's in Florida law. The only benefit on an automobile insurance policy that the insurance companies do not have the right of subrogation for is the PIP. So if MedPay pays out, $6,000 in benefits, then the insurance company has the right of subrogation to be reimbursed that $6,000 or something very close to it.
Does PIP pay funeral expenses?
Did you say funeral?
Yes, I did.
PIP essentially has three main categories. It will pay 80% of reasonable medical bills. It will pay 60% of any lost wages for you and anybody covered on the policy. And if somebody dies in the automobile crash or at some point later on, but the death is attributable to the crash, there's a $5,000 death benefit. That $5,000 death benefit is paid to the estate. Typically next of kin or the personal representative is the recipient, and that $5,000 is oftentimes used for funeral expenses. So in a sense, yes, it can provide for funeral expenses, but they call it a death benefit. The next of kin or whoever's responsible for paying for whatever expenses are incurred can use that $5,000 however they want. Okay?
Okay, if I am hit by a car while walking, will PIP pay the injury?
Your own PIP will pay if you have it. So if you own a vehicle and you're hit by a car, the vehicle that hit you, that PIP will not cover your expenses because you have your own policy. Now, alternatively, if you're walking and you don't own a car and you don't live with somebody that owns a car and you simply have no PIP coverage available to you, then the vehicle that struck you, that PIP will cover you. So one way or the other, if you're hit by a car, then there is PIP that will be available to cover you.
Okay, so lastly, I heard this common misconception that the driver's PIP insurance will automatically cover any passenger riding in his or her car. What does that mean?
Well, that's the first question you asked. It's a misconception because most people think that the PIP coverage of the vehicle they're in has to cover them, and that's just not true. If you have your own policy, then your own policy will cover you with PIP coverage. The terminology that we use in Florida is that your own policy follows you. So that if you're driving somebody else's car, your automobile insurance policy, even though you're not in your car, is going to be primary. The coverages that you have on your automobile policy to protect you are going to be primary over the automobile coverage on the vehicle that you're driving itself. And so a lot of people just think that, and it's a commonsensical approach, that the vehicle they're in is the vehicle that's supposed to cover them, and that's just not the case. It's your coverage, and again, it extends to people that you may live with in your household. Your coverage follows you first. Okay?
Okay, I have a friend that who was recently injured as a passenger in a car. Will PIP be able to cover that because she was only a passenger?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's what I was saying. One way or another, she'll be covered. She'll be covered either through her own policy if she has one, through a roommate's policy if she lives with somebody that owns a vehicle, and if she's a disclosed driver, she can be covered under that policy. And if she doesn't qualify under any other policy, then yes, the vehicle that she's in, that PIP will pay for PIP benefits. And it's not...
Would she be able to sue the other driver of the car that was at fault?
Sure, of course. Yeah, if the other driver was responsible for the accident, was negligent, then yes, that's a legitimate claim that she can make.
Okay. And the last thing I want to mention is that is there something known as host vehicle PIP coverage?
Well, that's what you've been talking about. The host vehicle is the vehicle in which she's riding as a passenger. So host vehicle PIP coverage is secondary typically because, again, the passenger's own insurance would be primary. But the host vehicle PIP coverage will become available to the passenger if she doesn't have it anywhere else. And she will have it up to $10,000. If you've got two people in a car and they're both going to use the same insurance policy for the PIP coverage, it doesn't mean that they each get $5,000. They each get $10,000 of PIP coverage.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Jeff, for your time.
Absolutely. Thanks for calling, Don. I always appreciate it. Love the interaction.
Oh, appreciate it very much.
Yep.
Bye.
So, good morning to everybody watching on Facebook Live. If you're just tuning in, I'm Jeff Vastola, and I'm your host here every Saturday morning from 7:30 to 8 in the morning. On Saturdays, today I'm on my back porch. I've got Dr. Mejia watching me this morning. Good morning, Dr. Mejia. I see that you've asked me a question. I may have to get to your question after the show because I'm having a hard time reading as I'm talking. I can't multitask, but I will respond to you as soon as I'm done with the show. And if you'd like to call into the show, please do so. I'm going to look at my screen to cheat because I need the number here. 877-850-8585. That's the number to call into the station. You can be live on the air with me as Don just did from Delray Beach. You can ask me anything you want. Don had emailed me earlier in the week with a bunch of these questions about automobile insurance. And I said, why don't you call me on the show? Because I think other people might benefit from hearing the answers to those questions. But I have topics planned of my own. I wish that I could get to Dr. Mejia's. I don't want to get too close to the screen here. It says, yeah, that's a question I'll have to cover after the show, Dr. Mejia, just because I can't read that much while I'm trying to talk. But I do have some things that I wanted to cover from my Florida Law Weekly today. Again, call me with anything you want. Call the radio show. Be live on the air with me. If I can answer your question, that's exactly what I'm going to do. If I can't answer your question, I'm going to do the research that I have to do to get back with you the following week with the answer to your question. So I will do that as well. But 877-850-8585 is the number to call. And if you're just tuning in now and you missed the beginning part of the show, remember we have a free legal seminar April 27th. It's going to be at the Embassy Suites Hotel from 1 to 4. Who's that again, DJ?
Al from Boynton Beach.
Okay, let's talk to Al from Boynton Beach. Good morning, Al.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
Good, how you doing?
Man, couldn't be better. We're in the perfect place at the perfect time.
It's a beautiful place to be. There's no doubt about it. What's your question, Al?
You know, I'm a real estate agent, and I got a client who, I believe is being harassed by her HOA. They've got a whole bunch of policies that are not in the bylaws, and they're making her jump through hoops to do a small project in her backyard, and the president is bullying her and intimidating her, and I told her to reach out to you. I have her listening on the radio. I don't know what types of advice you can give her.
Well, I can tell you this. If they're trying to enforce rules, so-called rules or regulations that are not in the bylaws, that's typically referred to as selective enforcement. And it is absolutely, I don't want to say illegal. It's not a crime, but it's certainly unenforceable. That also goes for things that are in the bylaws that they are not enforcing against others, but they're enforcing against one person specifically. But the selective enforcement becomes a much easier claim to prove if it's actually not in the rules or in the regulations. So, recommendation to get an attorney is probably a good one. And whether it would be me or somebody else, it really depends on what the issues are. I certainly appreciate the fact that you told her to contact me and to tune into the show, but it's a pretty simple answer. If she's being singled out, and if they're not enforcing this across the board with everybody, then she shouldn't be forced to deal with it.
Excellent. I guess the biggest concern are legal fees, and again, I'm not a lawyer, so I have no idea, but I did tell her that because her case seems to be so strong and singular to her, that a good lawyer would try to countersuit for legal fees. Would that be a correct statement, or am I out of bounds?
You're most likely correct in that, but hopefully a situation like this is resolved amicably with some initial correspondence. Oftentimes boards work under groupthink mentality, where they get together and they think because they all agree on it that it's the right thing to do. Sometimes it's just a matter of somebody coming in, intervening, and pointing out to them that what they're doing is wrong from a legal standpoint and that they're not allowed to do it. and sometimes that fixes the problem, and therefore, the fees that your client may incur are relatively insignificant and probably not worth initiating litigation just to try to get reimbursed. But the small amount of money that she would spend to get rid of the problem is hopefully well worth it. If it gets into litigation and both sides start to incur significant fees, that's when claims for attorney's fees become more salient.
I
So,
really appreciate the show. Really appreciate the feedback and your time.
Sure.
A lot of people.
Thank you, Al. I appreciate you listening, and I appreciate the recommendations. So I'll wait to hear from her, okay? All right, thank you, Al. Appreciate that. You too. Have a great weekend. It's beautiful today. I wanted to talk about a couple of issues. If you want to do the same thing Al just did, you can call into the show. It's 877-850-8585. I'm here live every Saturday from 7:30 to 8 in the morning. You can hear the birds singing in the background today as I'm on my back porch. And you can reach me 24/7 any other time by calling 833-VASTOLA. That's a toll-free number that forwards to my cell phone. I'm always available, meaning if I can answer the phone, I will. If I don't answer my phone, leave me a voicemail message and I will get back with you. But I want to be here as a resource for you. I just have a couple of issues here. These are interesting legal issues, at least interesting to me. And so I thought they might be interesting to somebody else. But the Apex Doctrine. Have you ever heard of the Apex Doctrine? Well, frankly, I hadn't heard about it until I read this case. This is the case of Sherry Cavey versus Rick Wells. Rick Wells is the sheriff of Manatee County in Florida, and it's whenever an individual is going to sue the sheriff, you name the sheriff individually, even though very likely the sheriff himself or herself didn't do anything wrong. But anyway, that's why the style of the case is Sherry Cavey versus Rick Wells, sheriff of Manatee County. This is an unfortunate case where Sherry Cavey's son committed suicide while in custody. And allegations are that the sheriff's office was negligent in providing her son with the tools to commit suicide, and so on and so forth. They should have been aware of the fact that he was suicidal, and they shouldn't have given him what he needed to commit suicide, and so on and so forth. Well, the sheriff in that case attempted to utilize what's called the Apex Doctrine to prevent himself, now again, this time it is the sheriff, Rick Wells, from being deposed. And so deposed is the verb form of a deposition, which is a noun. Deposition is a discovery tool where we can put somebody under oath with a court reporter present, ask questions, and the answers are given under oath, and therefore they can be used in a court of law. If you weren't aware, statements and things like that people give that are not under oath are typically not admissible in a court of law, which is why you oftentimes want to have deposition testimony if you're a trial lawyer and you're preparing your case for a trial. So the plaintiff's lawyers wanted to take the deposition of the sheriff, and the sheriff said, I don't think I want to give a deposition in this case, and I can understand why. If you read the substance of the case, you'll actually understand why he didn't want to be deposed. Turns out that in this case, the sheriff actually knew the plaintiff and the decedent and was likely aware that he was a suicidal young man and probably should not have been given what he was given. But anyway, the Apex Doctrine says this: it protects the top officers of a corporation or a sheriff's office from being deposed without a showing that they have unique or special knowledge of the events in question, and that the party seeking the deposition is unable to obtain the information using less intrusive means. That's language cited from Citigroup versus Holtzberg, which is a Florida 4th DCA case, which is right here in our backyard. And it goes on to say, the dicta in this case goes on to say, well, neither this court nor the Florida Supreme Court has expressly adopted the Apex Doctrine. Our sister courts have adopted the Apex Doctrine in the government context with respect to high-ranking government officials. So the Florida Supreme Court has yet to come along and say, okay, the Apex Doctrine is formally accepted in Florida and we can utilize it, but the DCAs throughout the state of Florida have acknowledged it and accepted it, and so it's probably just a matter of time before the Florida Supreme Court does it. Just a matter of the issue going all the way up to the Florida Supreme Court, giving that court the opportunity to say yay or nay. But anyway, that is the Apex Doctrine, and so now you know. Let me see, what else do I have? Last week, I talked about certain remedies that are available to people If something should go wrong and you're wondering, okay, what can I do about this? Oftentimes the answer is money. That's most oftentimes what the civil side of the courthouse is all about. It's typically about money, but not always. Now understand that the courthouse is generally divided into two halves. Now, you know, there are certain things that go on the two different halves, but you have the civil side of the courthouse, and then you have the criminal side of the courthouse. And relatively self-explanatory, but the criminal side of the courthouse is dealing with criminals and criminal issues, including juvenile. And then the civil side of the courthouse is dealing with essentially everything else. On the criminal side of the courthouse, you're typically dealing with jail time as the remedy. On the civil side of the courthouse, you're typically dealing with money. But it doesn't have to be money, and one of the other remedies that I discussed last week is one called specific performance. And lo and behold, this week in my Florida Law Weekly,
30 seconds.
oh, I'm out of time, says VJ. If you're interested, look at Eugene Morey versus Fortune Capital Partners, and you'll learn a little bit more about specific performance. But I'll try to remember to pick up here next week. I want to thank all of you for listening. I want to thank Al and Don for calling into the show. It makes it much more interesting. I hope all of you have a great weekend. God bless. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.